With tensions rising between the Soviet Union and the West, a plan was drafted to decide the future of the countries destroyed by World War II. This plan would formally be discussed at the Yalta Conference in 1945. At the conference, Joseph Stalin, Winston Churchill, and Franklin Roosevelt agreed that their countries would pursue the earliest possible establishment through free elections of governments responsive to the will of the people in the countries devastated by the war. In return for his cooperation, Stalin argued for the ability to take war booty from the conquered enemies without limitation. Stalin did not stay true to his agreement at Yalta, and shortly after World War II ended, his intentions were made clear. With Russian forces still occupying the liberated countries, Stalin created fake elections in which he brought the Communist Party to power. In a comment recorded by Milovan Djilas, Stalin said that whoever occupies a territory also imposes on it his own social system. Everyone imposes his own system as far as his army has the power to do so. Stalin believed that these new territories were crucial to the rebuilding of the USSR. After suffering significant damage to industry and infrastructure, as well as 27 million dead, the Soviets needed a boost to build their economy. Subsequently, much of the industrial assets in Eastern Europe were relocated into Russia. Countries in the Eastern Bloc were organized to provide resources such as coal, industrial equipment, and technology to Russia. From 1945 to 1953, the Soviets received about $14 billion in assets from these countries, equivalent to the amount of supplies and money invested in Western Europe during the Marshall Plan. In Germany alone, between 1945 and 1946, 3,500 factories and 1.15 million pieces of equipment were extracted. An interesting contrast arose during this time. As the East was siphoning resources away, the West was investing money for future growth. Such repercussions are evident today in Eastern European countries, which continue to experience lower standards of living than their Western counterparts. Stalin's takeover of Eastern Europe had two distinct stages. First was the destruction of the old society, both economically and politically. For many of the countries such as Yugoslavia, Hungary, and Poland, World War II and the Soviet occupation had already accomplished some of this. Soviet influence was then expanded into the country. This was done by pushing the Communist Party into power and popularizing ideas such as land reforms and punishing anyone who opposed their regime. Stalin commented that the presence of the Red Army had such power that even if you say 2 times 2 equals 16, your opponents will affirm it. In response to resistance fighting in Poland alone, some 600,000 people were arrested between 1944 and 1952. Party planners thought it necessary to first carry out political reform, as it would reduce the chance of statewide revolt during economic changes. Resistance continued, however, and the Soviets believed that the tighter economic control would suppress uprising and raise living standards to compete with the West. The second stage involved the creation of a new political economy. This communist economy would introduce complete state ownership, collectivization of agriculture, and rapid industrialization. Through the use of terror, a one-party system was established, just as in the Soviet Union. Heads of state came from Moscow and were trained to have views that were beneficial to Russia's agenda. The drastic changes in these countries were directed by a series of ambitious plans ranging from 2 to 6 years in length. In East Germany, one such plan had 4 main numbers that were highly publicized: 35% increase in production, 30% rise in productivity, 15% increase in wages, and 7% reduction in budgets. These plans would concentrate efforts on a few key industries, and the countries went to great lengths to meet their goals. As a result, many sectors of the economy fell far behind, the same phenomenon Russia experienced during its 5-year plans. Positions of power were readily available during this time of rebuilding if people were willing to join the Communist Party. Opportunities to climb the social and political ladder existed because millions died during the war, and the more than 15 million people in Eastern Europe who were uprooted and transferred to distant locations after the war. During this period, a group of people arose that had no loyalty to the old Bolshevik values and instead were willing to play the system and be rewarded with benefits such as plentiful food rations and top quality education for their children. Similar to the nomenclature in Russia, who were rewarded with positions of power based on their position in the Communist Party. Once initial post-war reconstruction was complete, The elites in Eastern Europe had more control, but were still ultimately ruled by the Soviet Union as it possessed the primary products needed for industrialization and thus controlled the political and economic transactions. At this time, before Stalin's death, Eastern Europe was growing fast and many of the ambitious economic plans were paying off. But these were short-term games that were quick to slow down when Stalin, the man who had brought together these countries with an iron fist, died on March 5th, 1953.